Welcome to the Hunger for Change podcast, a space where we challenge conventions and introduce you to the leaders who are reshaping health and science. I'm your host, Niklas Gustafson, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Michael Breus, a clinical psychologist and an acclaimed authority on sleep medicine with over 25 years of experience. Besides treating patients, Dr. Breus is a sought-after lecturer, and his knowledge is shared daily in famous media from Dr. Oz to Oprah and WebMD. Dr. Breus is also the best-selling author of The Power of When, The Sleep Doctor's Diet Plan, Good Night, and Energize. Dr. Michael's insights reach millions, helping to enhance their sleep and overall health. So, let's jump straight into a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Niklas.
A pleasure talking to you. So, what does health mean to you?
Wow, that's a big question. What does health mean to me? Well, it's kind of, as you get older, it seems to mean different things. I'm 56, and for me, health means to be able to play tennis with my wife or pickleball, means to be able to go for walks with my dogs, means to be able to, one day when my children have children, play with my grandchildren, and to have a very positive attitude. That kind of combines together to bring you, in my definition, to bring me to health. Obviously, there are certain components to each one of those that requires to kind of get there. And sleep, for me, is probably one of the bigger components. It is the area I've kind of dedicated my life to studying. And I would argue you can't have health without sleep. Like, it's impossible.
Right. I think everybody's interested in knowing how they can improve their sleep. And I'm one of them. For sure. To be honest, I'm so interested in knowing what your story is and how you became interested in becoming a sleep expert. I must confess that I've been struggling with my sleep for many years. And the last 5 years, since I bought my Oura Ring, I started, measuring and monitoring my sleep. And to be honest, I did everything wrong except coffee, because I never liked coffee. So that was the only thing that I did right. But everything else, I had screens until late at bed. I was eating dinner too late. What else did I do? So basically I did everything wrong. But then, like 5 years ago, I started little by little turning things and alcohol. I stopped drinking alcohol completely a couple of years ago. So that's another thing. The only thing is that for me, it's been kind of hard to realize what part of all the changes I've done in my life that has made me improve my sleep. So it's going to be interesting to talk to you, because I think I'm going to learn a lot.
Maybe to start things off, how did I become a sleep doctor?
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what everybody wants to know.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So here's what I can tell you is I have a PhD in clinical psychology. So I am a psychologist. So while getting my PhD, you do what's called a residency program, where you go someplace and you practice all the things that you've been learning. And I ended up at a residency program where for 6 months, I was the person who learned about sleep. I worked in a sleep laboratory. We worked with people who had sleep apnea, narcolepsy, restless legs, all the different things. And here's what I can tell you, Niklas, is by the third day of my residency, I completely fell in love with clinical sleep medicine. And I'll tell you why. I help people like this. It's unbelievable how quickly you can help somebody who has a sleep problem. As a clinical psychologist, sometimes it can take weeks, months, even years before you see any treatment gains, let's say in somebody with anxiety or somebody with depression, right? But if I can recognize that somebody has sleep apnea and fix that, or I can recognize that they have narcolepsy or even insomnia, in many cases, we can shorten that window significantly and help people actually very, very quickly. And for me, that's a lot of fun, that's pretty cool. You get this really interesting opportunity, and it's an area of study that not a lot of people know about. I was hanging out with some friends at the gym, and they're asking me sleep questions. They're like, oh, does this bother you? When every time people talk to you, they ask you questions about sleep. And I said, not really, because when you're a sleep doctor, 99% of the time, the only time you meet somebody like me is if you're in my office and you have a problem, right? I want to try to get to people before they have the problem with sleep. Before they have a sleep disorder, before they have apnea or narcolepsy, I want to talk to them about what I call, instead of a sleep disorder, disordered sleep, right? So that is not following some of the rules, if you will, or at least not learning what your body requires and wants to have. And so over the course of time, I've barely spent a lot of energy looking at this. I've spent 25 years as a clinician, so I treat people. I'm not a guy who sits in the laboratory and studies people. I'm the guy that takes that information and puts it into practice in the real world to try to get people healthier and get people happier and get people, progressing in the direction that they want. And so when I got into clinical practice, it got very interesting. Started to see 30 patients a day, read 15 sleep studies each evening. It's a crowded practice. Did that for about 6-7 years. And during that period of time, I was fortunate. My best friend worked at this company called WebMD. And he said, "Hey, Michael, why don't you come on over here and check it out?" And I did. And they said, "Hey, why don't you come be the WebMD sleep expert?" And 15 years later, I was still the WebMD sleep expert, answering questions and developing content and things like that. And during that period of time, it really allowed me to do a lot of fun things. I got on the Oprah Winfrey show. I've been on the Dr. Oz show. Got an opportunity to really educate a lot of people out there in the universe about sleep. And, it turns out that it's a universal problem. And it's not the same everywhere you go. As an example, if you look in Spain, you guys historically have something called a siesta, which we don't have in the United States. And so the whole system is different. And so we should talk about how does that look and what does that do and things like that. So when you think about it, it really wasn't my thing that I was saying, hey, I want to go be a sleep doctor. But wow, it really affects so many people in so many unique ways that it really was a fun kind of job, always has been. As my wife says, you wouldn't be nearly as interesting at cocktail parties if you were a cardiologist, because as soon as somebody finds out, she rolls her eyes and walks to the bar because she knows I'm just going to get pummeled with questions. Yeah, she knows what's coming. And I like it. It's fun and we educate people and, we help people.
Yeah, it's the same with my wife when we're out meeting people. And as soon as someone starts asking about refined carbs, it's hard to stop me. You mentioned siestas. What do you think about siestas? Naps in general?
In general, I'm a fan, but if you have insomnia, you should never nap. And here's why. So one of the problems with insomnia is falling asleep. And in order to fall asleep, you have to have a buildup in your brain of something called adenosine. Like when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is adenosine. Adenosine kind of works its way through your system, goes to a very specific receptor area. And as it accumulates, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. Yeah. That's fine if you don't have insomnia, because you can take a nap, lower that adenosine a little, but you still have plenty of adenosine at night. But if you have insomnia, you might not have enough adenosine. So napping is a terrible idea, because what ends up happening is you don't fall asleep until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So that pushes your whole schedule that way. But as a general rule, I don't have a problem with naps. I do like to keep them well timed. So for napping, I say 25 minutes or less is better. Have you ever woken up from a nap and felt worse, not better? Because I certainly have. Yeah. That means you sleep too long, you get into that deeper stage of sleep, and then you really feel like crap when you wake up. So I tell people 90 minutes, which is a full sleep cycle, or 25 minutes or less.
Yeah, my favorite nap is 15-20 minutes and not too late in the afternoon, because then I find it really hard to fall asleep in the evening.
So one of the things I can tell you, at least here in the US, is we do see a slight core body temperature increase and then drop between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, which is coincidentally about the same time that most people would have a siesta if they were going to have one. So there appears to be a biological reason for that. So this small temperature spike causes a small release of melatonin, and that's what makes you feel sleepy.
What defines high quality sleep to you?
Great question. I don't think about sleep in minutes or hours, and a lot of people do. So I'm here to tell everyone who's listening, 8 hours is a myth, okay? It's different for everyone, and it all depends on quality. As an example, I personally would much rather get 6.5 hours of high quality sleep than 8 hours of crappy sleep, okay? Now, let me explain to you what I mean by quality now. So there's really two aspects to quality. Well, I should say there's three aspects to quality sleep. Number one is the depth, right? So do you go from stage 1 to stage 2, get into stage 3, 4? Do you get into REM sleep? How much of each one of those becomes important, okay? So getting good depth of sleep is very, very important in terms of your quality. Number two, number of awakenings, okay? So how long you stay down and asleep is a direct relationship to how good that sleep is. We like sleep in big, long chunks. Seems to help repair the body, help repair the mind, things like that. So you want to have high quality, meaning getting enough stages. You also want to, kind of understand what that means in terms of sleep cycles and things like that, and fewer awakenings, of course. And then it's about consistency in terms of when you sleep. And that will drive quality in every way because of this thing called your chronotype. So the thing that I'm most famous for is I really push on that button of chronotype. Now, for folks out there who may not have heard the term chronotype, you actually already know of the concept. If anybody in your life, or even you, have been called an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. We actually don't get to pick these. These are genetic. So I can show you on your 23andMe or your Ancestry.com or whatever sample you give me that looks at genetics, I can actually show you where on the human genome, it's called the PER3 area. And if there's a flip-flopping of the basic nucleotides, you become a night owl or you become an early bird. That turns out to be very interesting because, as an example, let's say that you're a night owl, but you have to wake up for work at 6 a.m. It doesn't matter how much sleep you get, the quality of it is going to suck because this is a genetic predisposition. So when I want people to get super high quality sleep, which is what I want them to do, I test for their chronotype. You can go to chronoquiz.com. That's my website for everybody. It's free, doesn't cost a dime. Go there, you take a 30-question quiz, and we have a pretty good idea at that point what your chronotype is. Then once you know your chronotype, you can plan your day, plan your sleep around it, and you become more efficient because, as an example, if you're a night owl, you know you're not going to bed at 9 o'clock at night. It's not going to work for you. You're going to bed at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, right? But if you're an early bird, going to bed at 9 o'clock makes perfect sense for you because you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So that's what you have to start to understand more about is your internal genetics. And that's how I would argue we improve sleep quality. Almost every person that I meet comes to me and says, I'm not getting 8 hours, Dr. Breus. Is that okay? I say, I don't give a crap. What I want you to do is get sleep within your chronotypical time frame, and let's see how much sleep you really need. So I did the experiment on myself, and here's what happened. Started going to bed at midnight. I am a night owl for sure.
So am I.
Okay, good. And I just let myself sleep until I woke up in the morning. At first, I was waking up around 7:30. Then after about 3 weeks, it was 7:15. Then it was 7 o'clock. I wake up now somewhere, if I go to bed at midnight, I wake up now somewhere between 6:30 and 6:45 naturally. I don't take anything to go to bed, and I'm not a big coffee person early in the morning. I like my coffee about 90 minutes after I wake up, and I'll explain why in a minute. And what ends up happening is I get super high quality sleep, and it condenses itself because I'm doing it at the right time. So believe it or not, I put more time back into people's day because if you know when to sleep and your body gets that super high quality sleep, you're basically sleeping at the right time.
So is that something, your chronotype, could that change? I mean, compared to when you're a child and when you're getting older? Because I do wake up earlier now than I did like 25 years ago.
Right. So we have what's called chronolongevity. So believe it or not, every person on Earth goes through the three main chronotypes throughout their lifetime. So when you're a baby, You're an early bird. You go to bed at 7:30 at night. You wake up at 4:30 in the morning, right? When you're a toddler, you're in the middle, what I call a bear, right? So you go to bed around 7:30, you wake up around 7:30. What happens when you're a teenager? You're a night owl, right? Remember when you were a teenager, what did you want to do? Stay up and play video games until 2 o'clock in the morning and sleep until 2 o'clock on Saturdays. Once you hit about 2025, then it kind of locks and loads and stays that way for about 35, 40 years. Then it changes again. So if you ever go out, like let's say you call up your parents or your grandparents and you say, hey, let's go to dinner. You know what they usually say? Great, I'll meet you at 5 o'clock. You're like, Grandma, I don't eat dinner at 5 o'clock. But she does because her chronotype is pushing her early again. So we see this happen throughout the lifetime. And if you know where you are in your lifespan, where your chronotype is, and you can match your activities to your chronotype, everything gets easier.
You know, Spain has another problem in addition to what you said, and that's that Spain is actually in the wrong time zone. So Spain should be in the same time zone as Great Britain, Portugal, and Morocco. But we are in a time zone more to the center of Europe. Germany, France, Switzerland, even Austria. No? Austria is a lot more to the east. So that is a problem. That's why Spaniards eat dinner at 11 o'clock, you know? That's crazy.
We might even look at, for some people, you might even look at what are you eating for dinner? So if you're going to have dinner at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, right? What should that meal look like? A, to get good sleep, but B, to not gain a lot of weight.
So do we all have the same sleep needs, or is sleep individual?
It is individual. And I would also argue that it's different male versus female, right? So for example, when women have a menstrual cycle, they have different sleep needs even throughout the 30 days. I have some women who require more sleep before their period and less sleep after their period. And so 8 hours wouldn't make sense for them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Also, when I look at my patients who are 25 versus my patients who are 55, right? They have different needs in terms of their sleep. So you really want to kind of try to dial in to your personal sleep needs. So the next question is, Michael, how do we do that? Okay, easy. Number one, if you learn one thing from this podcast, only one thing, this is the thing to remember. Wake up at the same time, 7 days a week. Don't sleep in on Saturday or Sunday. Same time, 7 days. Let me explain the biology and why this is so important. So our core body temperature rises until about 10:30 at night. And then it hits a high point and it begins to drop. That drop is a signal to our brain to release melatonin, okay? So our core body temperature drops throughout the night. It eventually turns up and we wake up in the morning time. When we wake up in the morning and our eyes open up, light hits our eyes and has a very special cell in our eyes called a melanopsin cell. This turns off the melatonin faucet in your brain, okay? That's important. But something else happens that not a lot of people know about. Your brain sets a timer for 14 hours later to start melatonin production again. This is the most critical thing that everybody needs to understand. So 14 hours from the time you wake up is when melatonin restarts. So if the time you wake up is variable, so does your melatonin production. So if you're waking up at 6 a.m., your melatonin production starts at 8 p.m., takes 90 minutes for it to kick into gear, 9:30 you start to get tired, 10 o'clock you go to bed. But if you wake up instead of at 6 a.m. at 8 a.m., melatonin doesn't kick off at 8 that night, it kicks off at 10 that night. So the timing of your melatonin production is directly related to when you wake up.
In the morning, okay.
In the morning, exactly.
That's so interesting.
If you want to do one thing to help your sleep at night, get up same time, 7 days a week. And this also helps with consistency. And if you can do it based on your chronotype, you get all the efficiencies plus the consistencies. And that's really what we're looking for.
So apart from waking up at the same time every morning, what should we think about in the morning when we wake up?
I will tell you, I have 3 things that I ask everyone to do every single morning. And it works quite well. The very first thing is to sit on the end of your bed, put your feet touching the floor, and I want you to take 10 deep breaths. This is just to wake up your respiratory system, kind of bring you present for the morning, right? And kind of clear the cobwebs. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to take 15 ounces of water. And you're going to drink it, okay? Most people don't know sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. You lose almost a full liter of water just from the humidity in your breath every day.
Yeah.
Right? So 15 deep breaths, 15 ounces of water, and walk outside. If you can, take off your shoes, put your feet on the earth, and get 15 minutes of sunshine. Now, you're probably saying, uh-oh, California doctor, here we go with all the craziness out there, okay? There's real biology behind why I want you to do this. That sunlight, when it hits your eye, just like we were mentioning before, turns off that melatonin faucet in your brain. And 15 minutes of sunshine is the exact amount of time that your body needs to produce vitamin D. Remember, vitamin D is critical in so many different things. Yeah. And lots of people, if they live in a part of the world that doesn't get a lot of sunlight, don't get vitamin D. So you want to get outside and get that if you can. Let's say you're in a part of the world that doesn't get that sunlight. You can actually buy an artificial light box. They cost about $100 US, and you can have that in the morning time, and you can get that, you can reproduce that sunshine. But if you do those three things every single morning after you wake up at the same time based on your chronotype, holy cow, you're going to have a great day.
What would you say are some common misconceptions about sleep that are clarified by understanding these chronotypes that you mentioned?
One of the biggest is when people have a hard time sleeping, like falling asleep or staying asleep. When you know your chronotype, it actually gives you a bedtime. And so you don't have to guess. You don't have to try to figure it out. We know when your body wants to sleep. Big problem that a lot of people have, especially people with insomnia, they go to bed too early. Now listen to what I'm saying because it's very interesting. So what happens is they say, holy crap, I haven't gotten good sleep in 3 or 4 nights. The kids are away. My husband is doing something. I'm going to sneak into the bedroom and I'm going to go to bed at like 8 o'clock and I'm going to catch up on all the sleep that I missed. Mm-hmm. That does not work. Let me explain why. So there are 2 systems in the brain for sleep. We've already talked about one of them, which is the one that has the adenosine in it. But there's a second system called your circadian rhythm. That is very specific, kind of like hunger. You notice how you're hungry around breakfast time, lunchtime, and dinner time? Circadian rhythm, most people here in North America, people get tired around 10:30. Probably where you are, people are getting tired around 11:30, 12:30, something like that. So we can kind of shift it a little bit sort of in that direction. And I think it kind of makes intuitive sense that way. But you really want to be thoughtful about keeping that level of consistency, because when you don't keep the consistency, your body doesn't actually know when to go to sleep and when to wake up. It takes about 30 days for it to lock and load, but once you get that in there, your body will start to naturally do that, and then it starts to condense the amount of sleep that you actually need.
Beyond sleep, how might knowing one's chronotype impact other areas of life, such as diet or exercise?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of questions about that all the time. The biggest area that we actually get questions on, believe it or not, is sex and intimacy. So they say, if I'm an early chronotype and my partner is a late chronotype, what do we do, right? And how does that work? When do we have dinner? When do we have discussions? When do we have all of these things? And so it turns out that once you know your chronotype, if you get my book, The Power of When, I actually show you by clock time exactly when to do different things based on your chronotype. So let's take health and let's take nutrition as one of the first things to think about, right? So if you know your chronotype and you understand what your current nutritional needs are, it actually lets you know the timing of when you should have food. So as an example, if you're a night owl like you and I are, we don't like breakfast, okay? I've never liked breakfast. If I can get a cup of coffee in me, it's a miracle, okay?
I haven't had breakfast for 15 years now.
You have or have not?
Have not.
Right. Very typical of night owls. So for a night owl, your food schedule, your first meal of the day might be 11 o'clock, right? Might be noon, right? Then you might have, let's say, your second meal probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then your final meal might not be until 10, right? So your timing is going to be different because you're a wolf than if you're an early bird, what I call a lion. Those people, they wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're hungry. So they're eating their first meals very early. They're having high protein meals because what are they doing? They're eating and then they're working out almost immediately after, or vice versa. They're working out first and then they're eating and getting their protein. That's what the early birds do. But us night owls, we hate waking up early. We hate working out early in the morning, especially when we're younger. As we get older, this seems to become more and more acceptable, kind of like grandma and grandpa eating a little bit earlier. Same thing seems to happen to us night owls as well. So while it's individual, the book does a great job of telling you what the windows are, for example, for food and even for exercise. So exercise turns out to be really interesting because what we've learned is there's 4 different basic types of exercise that we took a look at in terms of these chronotypes. We looked at cardiovascular, so running. We looked at weightlifting. We looked at yoga, and we looked at team sports, right? Because those are all things that lots of people like to participate in from a behavioral lifestyle standpoint. So then you start to wonder, when should you do this? So it turns out if you are an early bird, you should exercise early in the morning because your body is primed and ready and your muscles are ready to go and things like that. But if you're a night owl like you and me, if we try to exercise in the morning, we're so tired, we get injured, right? Our movements aren't as fluid as they other people who are morning exercises. Whereas if we exercise closer into the afternoon, our brains are more awake and would be able to do that a little bit better. So once you learn your chronotype, and there are 4, then you can actually, everything becomes easy. So early birds, I call them lions. People in the middle, I call them bears. Night owls, I call them wolves. And then I discovered a 4th chronotype, and that's kind of what I'm most known for, is I found that there's a whole group of people who have a lot of anxiety, not a lot of sleep, and it's very difficult for them to kind of make it through this whole process. I call them dolphins. The reason I call them dolphins, most people don't know it, but dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake looking for predators. I thought that's kind of like my insomnia patients. They're never quite asleep and trying to get there. But once you take the quiz and you figure out your category, then I can tell you exactly what time to do just about anything, because we've got almost 250 studies in the book of groups around the world that are looking at these types of things. So it's pretty interesting.
So you mentioned sex, when it's the best time to have sex. And I heard that women get more energized after having sex, while it's obvious that we get sleepy after having sex. Is that true?
The data is interesting. Here's what we've discovered. Here's the theory. I don't think anybody's actually proven this yet, but here's the theory is one of the hormones that's produced while you're being intimate is called oxytocin, which is known as the love hormone. What we think is when oxytocin mixes with testosterone, it makes you sleepy. But when oxytocin mixes with estrogen, it makes you more alert, right? So women are more estrogen dominant, men are more testosterone dominant. So we think, at least in part, it has to do with this hormonal mixing of testosterone with oxytocin and estrogen with oxytocin. And that's why we get the different reactions. Now, your question, which is an interesting one, is when should we be intimate? Assuming that our partner has a different chronotype, it could get pretty complicated. Now, for me, it was easy. My wife is a night owl. I am a night owl. And we learned this when we were dating. So I would say, I'll pick you up at 8, right? We'll get to dinner at 9. We'll eat until 10. Then we'll go to the movies until midnight. Then we'll go get a drink and we'll be home by 2, right? Now, that would be a typical, Madrid evening, right? That would be a great evening in Spain. Yeah. But here in the United States, that's considered super late. But she was a night owl and I was a night owl, so we never even noticed the difference.
Great match.
Now things are different. Now let's say you're at a different position where you don't match perfectly with your chronotype. Michael, when are we going to be intimate? we've done some research. So here's what we discovered is for women in particular, it really seems to be based on their chronotype. So if you're being intimate or you are a woman who has an early chronotype, like a lion and like to get up early, then you prefer to be intimate in the morning times. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're a female and you are a night owl, or what I call a wolf, you prefer sex in the evening times. Okay. Here's what's really interesting. With men, when we surveyed men based on their chronotype, you know what they said? Whenever it's offered. Okay. No joke. Like, I'm not making a joke. Men had a completely different understanding of sex. Men would say, if it's offered, I'm ready to go. So then we looked at it from a biological perspective. Okay. So you need 5 hormones to successfully be intimate, and they need to be elevated. You need estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol, and adrenaline all need to be high. And melatonin, the sleep hormone, needs to be low. Okay. Now, if you think about it, most people have sex between 11 and 11:30 at night here in the United States. Guess what? What do you think your hormone profile looks like? Melatonin is high, and all the other ones,
they're low.
Hint number 1. Hint number 2, if you're having sex with somebody who has a penis, what do most men have when they wake up in the morning? An erection. If that is not Mother Nature telling us when to use that thing, I don't know what is. So, looking at morning intimacy, we asked a group of people to be intimate in the morning, and then we surveyed them to find out what they liked or disliked about it. And here's what we learned, is the only dislike was breath, right? So go brush your teeth or throw in some mouthwash or have a mint, okay? Number 1. But here's what was so fascinating. For women, they reported better connection with their partner. They felt more intimate. They felt more emotionally connected to their partners by being intimate in the morning time. For men, performance was better. Longer erections, harder erections, and the ability to ejaculate. So it was it didn't work every single time, but what was fascinating was just by giving people the assignment of trying to be intimate in the morning time, it actually worked out much better for them.
Well, we're talking about hormones because you mentioned cortisol. Many discussions around cortisol label it negatively. I mean, because it's associated with stress. Can you explain the beneficial aspects of cortisol for your body?
Absolutely. So cortisol saves your life every single day. Okay? Cortisol is the fight or flight hormone. And so if you are ever in any position of danger, you're in microseconds, not even in a second. I mean, it takes like 100th of a second, and bam, adrenaline, cortisol kind of pops up. And this gives you massive energy to either put up your dukes or run away. Okay? That is the main goal of cortisol. The problem comes when cortisol is active late at night, right? When people are doing things that activate that cortisol in the evenings. What I try to explain to everybody out there is you've got to have runway to land the plane, okay?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is sleep's not an on-off switch, okay? It's like slowly pulling your foot off the gas, slowly putting your foot on the brake. You've got to give yourself some time and some space to allow the entire body to settle down. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You're going to get in bed and you're going to be exhausted and still awake. Like the example we were talking about earlier, where let's say you're out in the garden and you're working really hard and you sneak in to get an early night's rest. What ends up happening? Well, because your circadian rhythm doesn't want you to sleep, you lie there exhausted and upset, right? You're lying, like, why aren't I sleeping, right? And you know your body is super exhausted because your circadian rhythm is off, right? And so as we educate people to understand the consistency of that wake-up time, and I know it's hard to think, gosh, me waking up in the morning is going to have a traumatic effect on me going to bed at night. But that's the science. Like, that's what we have learned over the course of many, many years to try to figure this out, is you prepare best for bedtime right as you wake up in the morning.
Another hormone, melatonin. What would you say is the issue with having over-the-counter melatonin at the reach of everyone? I mean, who doesn't count with professional guidance and they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, well, so let's talk about this because this is a humongous problem, especially here in the United States where melatonin, you can walk into any store, anywhere, and you can buy melatonin right off the shelf. So let's talk about this for a few moments because I want everybody to really understand. As you correctly identified, Niklas, melatonin is a hormone, okay? You wouldn't walk down to the local drugstore and buy testosterone or estrogen, and there's a reason why, because it's dangerous, okay? But for some reason, melatonin seems to be one of those things that in many countries is available. In the United States, you can go anywhere and get it. But for example, in many places in Europe, it's by prescription only. In Australia, you have to be of a certain age and have a prescription in order to have melatonin. Now, the question is, why? Can this stuff hurt you? What's going on here? Most people do not know this. Melatonin affects other medications that you might be taking. Melatonin affects all antidepressant medication. Melatonin affects all diabetes medication. And melatonin affects all cardiovascular or high blood pressure medication. All of it. So remember, it's a circadian pacemaker. It changes when systems turn on and off inside of your body. So if you are taking an antidepressant for depression, and then you take a pill that changes the metabolism of that antidepressant, you're going to get a different effect, right? So number one, you've got to tell your doctor if you're going to take melatonin. Here's the problem. Most doctors don't know shit about melatonin. So what you have to do is you have to do some reading and understand a few things. Here's what's interesting. 95% of people make plenty of melatonin until age 55 to 60. That's when we start to see melatonin deficiencies. There's only 3 instances where I use melatonin in my practice: jet lag, shift work, and then in the elderly who have a melatonin deficiency. Other than that, it's really not appropriate in any way, and it's really a bad idea for children. Let me be clear. Children make 4 times the amount of melatonin that they need. You really do not need to add melatonin on top of that. Also, I want to be very clear. If you give a child a pill for sleep, they now think they need a pill for sleep.
Yeah.
Okay? Bad idea. Okay? This is a natural process. Children can sleep just fine. We don't need to give them melatonin. There is one group of children, however, where the data has shown tremendous progress with melatonin use, and that's melatonin in children with the autism spectrum disorder. So any child that's on the spectrum, whether it's Asperger's all the way to autism, we have now learned that between 3 and 4 milligrams of melatonin is an appropriate dose for those kids, sometimes as high as 6 milligrams.
Okay.
Now, if you're going to use melatonin, let's say for jet lag or for shift work, here's another problem. There was a study that was done probably about a year ago where they pulled about 30 bottles of melatonin off the shelves, and they started to look inside the capsules to see what was in them. Not a single one had the amount that was registered on the side of the bottle, either too high or too low.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So very, very graduated. We don't really know what we're getting, number one. Number two, almost all melatonin, at least in the US, is sold in an overdosage format. The appropriate dose is between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams total for an adult, okay? Total. Most of the time here in the US, we see it in 3 milligrams, 6 milligrams, 10 milligrams. So some people are taking 10 times the recommended dose. If you get weird dreams or nightmares taking melatonin, you are absolutely overdosing on melatonin. That's one of the early signs that you're using way too much. And again, you don't need it, okay?
Yep.
If you're flying from country to country, I get it, okay? If you're a shift worker where you work at night and have to sleep during the day, I get it, okay? And if you're elderly and your melatonin starts to slow down, I get it. But other than that, there really is not a need to utilize melatonin in this way for anybody. And by the way, if you just keep a consistent wake-up time, it resets your circadian clock in 30 days.
And it's not needed. Okay.
Right.
how critical is the role of growth hormone during sleep, and why is it often referred to as the holy grail of anti-aging?
Growth hormone, that's what real beauty sleep is. So you've heard this term, sleeping beauty, beauty sleep. You get better sleep, you look better. Growth hormone actually makes that true. So during stages 3 and 4, which is arguably our deepest non-REM sleep, okay, that is where we see most of our physical restoration occur. That's where growth hormone comes in, right? So if you pull a muscle while you're working out, or you're running and you strain your back, or whatever you do, stage 3 and 4 is where growth hormone comes in and fixes any of the problems that happen during the daytime. So we think that this is the holy grail of longevity, because the more growth hormone you have, the more young your muscles are, basically. The youth of your system is oftentimes based on how much growth hormone you have. So stage 3 and 4 is where you get the most growth hormone. Now, there's another thing that's super important about growth hormone, and that's that growth hormone is a direct indicator of your immune system as well. Growth hormone helps you develop what are called killer T cells, which are special white blood cell immunity cells that we use to fight off things like viruses and colds and things like that. So when something like COVID happened, right, sleep became a very important factor, specifically stages 3 and 4 sleep, because if we get more growth hormone, we get more killer T cells, we fend off COVID better. So sleep turned out to be one of the most important things that you could possibly do during COVID and beyond. I would argue that other than breathing and drinking water, sleep is probably the third most important thing that a human can do.
Talking about REM sleep, could you explain what happens during REM sleep and why it's considered to be a crucial stage of our sleep cycle?
Remember when I was just talking about stages 3 and 4 in deep sleep, and that's the physical restoration?
Yeah.
REM sleep is the mental restoration. So this is where we move information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. This is where we do a whole host of things. But you know what? I just remembered another thing that I forgot to mention about stage 3, 4 sleep. Can I go backwards real quick?
First.
So stage 3, 4 sleep, I forgot, about 7 or 8 years ago, a Nobel Prize winning scientist discovered this really interesting thing called the glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system is kind of like the waste management system of the brain. It's kind of like a garbage truck that comes into your brain, and it takes all these bad proteins and it brings them out. Those proteins, if left in your brain, will surround your nerves and strangle them, and that's called Alzheimer's disease. So stage 3 and 4, and growth hormone and all the things that happen in there, super duper important, not just for our current health, but also for the future of our mental health. Now, in REM sleep, we know that that's where we move information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory, creating an organizational substructure, kind of like a filing cabinet, right? So like if you get information in through your eyes or your ears or your nose, and you want to save that information because something smells really good, like chocolate chip cookies, and you want to remember to eat chocolate chip cookies, you store that during REM sleep. Now, there's a few other things that happen during REM sleep as well that I think are quite fascinating. One of them is dreaming, okay? So let's talk for just a moment about what are dreams and how do they work. So what we know is you can actually dream in any stage of sleep, but if we wake you up out of REM sleep, 85 to 90% of the time, you tell us that you're dreaming. So we know that dreaming seems to occur a lot during REM sleep. We also know that throughout the night, your dreams are like chapters in a book. So if you wake somebody up at the beginning of the night, and let's say they're dreaming about walking their dog, if you wake them up in the middle of the night, they're still walking their dog, right? So it's just chapters in a book of a kind of a continuous story oftentimes. So that's interesting fact number one. But here's what we've learned most recently is that dreams are emotional metabolism. Let me explain what I mean. During the dream state, you are working through emotions. You are accepting and processing things that happened to you during the daytime that were emotionally relevant to you. So you got into a fight with your spouse, or your child did something great at school, or what have you. those emotions must get processed in order for them to be retained or gotten rid of. Either way, you've got to process them. Here's where it gets interesting. If you can't process an emotion during a dream, you wake up and it's called a nightmare. And then the processing stops. Then you go back to sleep and you work your way up to the dream and you get scared, wake up, processing stops. And this is the repetitive nature of nightmares, okay? So understanding what's going on in your dream turns out to actually be somewhat important, but it's only important to you. As an example, you could have a dream and I could have a dream. We could both have a dream where there was a lion in the dream, but it could mean incredibly different things. So I want to be clear, it's not like there are these dream symbols out there that mean the same thing for everyone. That is complete bullshit, okay? But there is dream therapy. This is new and very interesting, but this is where, while conscious, while awake, you are describing your dream to a dream therapist, not a dream interpreter, who then helps you move through the dream and process the emotions that you by yourself are having a hard time doing. When you do this, the nightmares go away.
Really?
It's unbelievable. It's amazing. I'm learning how to do this in my practice now because it wasn't part of my original training. I have a year-long course that I'm learning, and I've got to tell you something, dude. It's cool. It's so fascinating because you're there with them almost inside of their dream and helping them, walking them through. You're actually not even being a therapist. You're not saying, well, this means this and this means that. You're just being safe, being next to them in their mind and just helping them walk through this dream.
Okay.
And here's what's so crazy. It doesn't matter which technique you do, just doing any technique lowers the intensity and lowers the frequency of the nightmares. And that's when you start to have progress. So REM sleep can be quite complicated because it can have these types of nightmares in it, or it can be quite pleasant where you can really understand things. One of the things that people used to say all the time is, you know, I got a big decision I got to make. I want to sleep on it before I do so. This actually makes really good sense because of the emotional processing and the logical processing of memory during REM sleep to allow you to make a better decision.
Stage 2 sleep, as I understand, it has very important characteristics and benefits. Could you delve into what occurs during this stage and its importance?
Stage 2, when we look at it from a hierarchy standpoint, I would argue it's probably equally as important, but we don't have a tremendous understanding of everything that goes on during stage 2. However, that's being said, there are two things that happen during stage 2 that are very, very important. One are called K complexes. The other thing are called sleep spindles. These are brain waves that happen during this particular stage that allow for other productions of other structures in your brain to continue to work. As an example, your thyroid, your thymus, all of these other brain structures during stage 2 are actually regrouping, regenerating, and forming new functions again and again. And so I would argue that stage 2 sleep is more of a combination of all the things that happen in REM and in stage 3, but more on the general level. And then when you get to stage 3, it intensifies for physicality. And then when you get to REM sleep, it intensifies for mental.
My Oura ring keeps telling me that my deep sleep is too short. It's been telling me this for 5 years now. I'm trying to improve, but I don't know how to do that. Could you recommend strategies to increase the amount of time spent in that deep sleep?
I'm going to recommend a better strategy, okay? So number one, don't look at your numbers. So I can't tell you the number of times, Niklas, that this happens to me, where somebody grabs their phone and they walk up to me and they say, Dr. Breus, what does this mean? And they're showing me their Oura ring or their Whoop strap or along those lines, right? Yeah. And they say, I only got 14 minutes of deep sleep. I need more deep sleep. Okay? Classic. So number one, I'm not convinced that it's accurate. If you are consistently every night getting 14 minutes of deep sleep, here's what I know. Number one, you're not getting only 14 minutes. The device is consistently being inaccurate. That's okay. As long as it's consistent, I can still work with the data. So if you get 14 minutes one night and 300 the next, then I want to know what's going on. But if you're consistently getting,
Yeah, I'm consistent. Yeah.
I don't think I give a shit. Okay. Because it's, again, we don't know the accuracy level that we really need here. So what I tell people all the time is look for the trend, number one, and number two, don't look every single morning. That is a problem for a lot of people because they pick up their phone and they're like, oh, what's my sleep score today? And one of two things happens. Either they agree with it and they feel really good about themselves, or they disagree with it and their whole day is messed up.
All right.
So they might get a good score and then they're like, wait a second, I feel like crap. How could I get a good score? Or the opposite could be true. You know, I feel great, but it's giving me a poor score. Again, unfortunately, with all the trackers, I'm not picking on Oprah. I was on their clinical advisory board for over a year. What nobody is doing is they're not telling people what the data means. Okay. And I think that's a real problem. What I would love is if these companies would create a library of videos with their experts and these, case studies to say, hey, here's somebody who only gets 14 minutes of deep sleep. Let's really take a look at what's going on here. And then it explains it to everybody and then people relax and then they move forward. But they won't do that because they don't want to practice medicine. So what I do is I get on podcasts with people and people send me their data and we figure it out. And I slowly, try to get them there because that's one of the biggest problems with tracking is right now, there's really very little interpretation of the tracking that's being done. Now, my prediction for the future is I would argue with AI moving at such a rapid pace as we are seeing now, it would not surprise me within the next 18 months to 2 years that we have some level of technology that will actually identify our chronotype, tell us what time to go to bed, tell us what time to eat, all of those things on a very good schedule so that we get the most out of our bodies. I think we're still a little ways away from that, but I think it's going to happen eventually.
Okay, so I told you at the beginning that the last 5 years I've tried to improve my sleep, and I do see that I sleep more. Every year, these 5 years, I've seen 15-20 minutes improvement. Yeah, so that's really good.
What time do you go to bed?
I'm happy to that. Well, I go to bed around, this is going to sound too super late to you, but I usually fall asleep around 12:30.
That's not late. That's about what time I go to bed. So you get in bed at 12:30. What time do you wake up?
No, I fall asleep at 12:30. I usually go to bed at around 12. So about 30 minutes. I usually put a podcast and I
Perfect. I got no problems with that. Podcasts are good. We have animals in our bed. My wife likes to watch TV. All the things you're not supposed to do happen in my house. Okay, because that's lifestyle, right? That's the practicality of it. And so you get in bed at midnight. You fall asleep by 12. What time do you get up?
I usually wake up at around 7:30 or so.
So you're getting roughly 7 hours of sleep. Within 5 minutes of waking up, how do you feel? Do you feel refreshed, or are you like, I need a cup of coffee?
No. Usually I feel refreshed, and I do what you recommend is to go outside to get sunlight. I try to do that because I heard that. So that's a great. What about a healthy evening night routine? I know that keep away from the screens. I know that we should eat not too late.
I've got a couple of ideas here.
Yeah. Okay. So please tell me your ideas.
Yep. So what I like to do is I call it the 3-2-1 rule. Okay. So 3 hours before lights out, stop alcohol. Okay. 2 hours before lights out, stop food. 1 hour before lights out, stop fluids. Okay. Make sure you go to the bathroom before you go to bed, especially if you're a guy over age 45, because otherwise you're going to have to get up in the middle of the night and pee.
Which I do every night. Yeah, I do it.
I like that 3-2-1 rule. I think that works out really well. Also, for the last hour of my day, I take that hour and I chop it up into 3 20-minute segments. So it's just 20 minutes for things I have to do. So for me, oftentimes it's a last minute email or finding kids, sports equipment and getting things ready for the next day. Just things that will make my morning a little bit easier. 20 minutes for hygiene. So, brush your teeth, wash your face, take an evening shower, bath, whatever you do. And then 20 minutes for some form of meditation, relaxation, prayer, reading, something, again, to give you runway to land the plane. You just don't want to go, 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 and then fall into bed, right? You really want to give your body that time to slowly wind down. And here's why. I want to be very thoughtful on telling everybody here's why. Because there's one metric that almost nobody knows. In order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of about 60 or below.
Is that when you fall asleep, or is because my lowest heart rate is about 50 or 51, but that's the lowest one. That's not the one that I have when I go to sleep. When I go to sleep, it might be, I'm not sure, but I think it's about 60 or 65.
So everybody's a little bit different, but here's the reason why you don't just work, and then notice is you've got to do something to slow your heart rate down to that 60, 65 range.
Right.
That's what you're using that half an hour for before bed or 20 minutes before bed. For me, I like to do a special kind of breathing called 4-7-8 breathing. It's exactly what it sounds like. You slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. This has been developed a long time ago, specifically for the U.S. Navy SEALs to help them lower their heart rate very, very rapidly. So this is a great technique. And I personally, I use 4-7-8 breathing, not just to help me fall asleep, but if I'm a little nervous sometimes, like if I'm going to go do a television show or if I'm going to speak in front of a group of people, I'll do 2 or 3 rounds of 4-7-8 breathing. You know, just calms me down, kind of puts me in place, and I'm like, let's go, you know, and I don't have that nervous energy. I have that calm, relaxed energy. And so I like this technique. I use it often.
Actually, a part of my evening routine the last couple of years, it's been sauna and cold plunging.
Love it.
I love that. But the thing is that people tell me that, well, you shouldn't do cold plunging before going to bed. But for me, it actually works because I start with sauna and then I do cold plunging and then sauna and then cold plunging and then I finish off with sauna, so that I get the heat before. And I love that. And I think that it's actually improved my sleep.
So I've got some data on that very fact. So one of the things we know is if we elevate the core body temperature about 90 minutes before bed, the subsequent fall helps produce melatonin. So artificially raising your core body temperature by going into a sauna is a great idea before bed, because then your body has to let it fall, and that's the signal to allow you to sleep. Now, what you're doing is even more interesting, and let me tell you why. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I had this patient, and he told me the craziest thing. He said when he had a problem waking up in the middle of the night, and he couldn't go back to sleep. And so what he would do is this is going to sound nuts, he would go and do a cold plunge in the middle of the night. Okay. And he told me, I don't know what it is, but I can fall asleep right after it. And so I looked it up. There's one study to show in the middle of the night, cold plunging actually increased melatonin for him. So that must have been what was going on. Your routine, I like a lot better because it's hot, cold, hot, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So what you're doing is you elevate and then decrease, elevate and then decrease. And then when the last elevation comes, your body does the decrease for you. So you've been priming it the whole time to do what it's supposed to do. And that's probably what's really helping. So I've never heard of anybody doing a routine like yours, but thinking about it, it makes perfect sense.
So my wife, she keeps harassing me, telling me that to put away my phone before bed. How bad is it to watch screens before bed? Because I'm actually very, I do always put the night shift, and not only night shift, I do bring down, it's completely red, you know, it's quite hard to read if you get used to it, but I do know that the night shift itself, it's not enough, but then I bring it all the way down to the, red screen.
So here's what I'll tell you. It's not as much about the amount of blue light as it is about your engagement to the topic.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to get your high score on Candy Crush while you're falling to sleep, you're really not trying to fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
Right? So what I tell people to do is if you're going to do a screen, have it be something boring, have it not be something that's particularly engaging. Also, the amount of blue light that you're getting it depends upon how much blue light your eyes have seen during the previous 24 hours as to how much of that frequency hits the rods and cones in the particular way that would be disruptive to sleep. So while I tell people you don't want to sit there and scroll for a long time, if you play with your phone for 15 minutes, then you need to not play with your phone and relax for 15 to 30 minutes type of thing. Right. So give yourself a little bit of time to do your thing, and then the alarm goes off and you can click and you can, again, make a gratitude list in your head. Think about really interesting data to show that being positive before falling asleep not only helps you fall asleep more quickly, but gives you more positive dreams.
What about caffeine? What about coffee and tea? How many hours before should you stop drinking?
At the end of the day, remember, coffee has no nutritional value whatsoever, or caffeine rather. Exactly. So it's really completely unnecessary in your diet.
Yeah.
So if you can eliminate it, please eliminate it. If you can't, I get it, but follow these guidelines. So in order for your brain to come out of a state of unconsciousness, you need two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and they're pretty high. When you've woken up and you've got adrenaline and cortisol working around your head, when you add caffeine to that, it's like adding weak tea to somebody who's doing cocaine, okay? It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. But if you just wait 90 minutes after you wake up, the natural degradation of cortisol and adrenaline happens. And if you add caffeine at the 90-minute mark, it actually lifts the adrenaline and cortisol, and you get a bigger bang for your buck. And you only need 1 cup of coffee a day. I've discovered this and I've used it. I don't even drink caffeine probably 3 or 4 days a week. I like to drink a little bit of caffeine right before my weightlifting workouts. Because I do work out in the mornings and I am a night owl. And so it's hard for me to have enough energy. So I will have a half a cup of coffee just before I work out, but that's usually all I have. And that's always 90 minutes after I've woken up. For folks who can't stop the coffee there, if you can, the best place to start is around 2 p.m. is to stop your caffeine, depending upon your bedtimes.
Which means how many hours before bedtime?
Right. So in Madrid, it's going to be a little different. It might be 4 p.m. there.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is roughly 8 hours before lights out is when you want to stop caffeine, because caffeine has a half-life of about 8 hours, which means 50% is still wandering around your brain at night. And for folks with insomnia, if you can avoid caffeine altogether, it's a good idea.
How does waking up with an alarm clock influence our hormonal balance, especially if it interrupts our sleep cycle?
I hate alarms. I hate them. And the worst is the snooze alarm, right? Where you hit it and then it goes off 9 minutes later, and you hit it and it goes off 9 minutes later. So number one, snooze is the worst invention for all of sleep. If you hit that, your body has to go back to stage 1 and then go into 2 and 3. So all you're doing is giving yourself very light, crappy sleep when you're hitting the snooze button. So if you can, avoid the snooze altogether. Set your alarm for the last possible moment when you have to wake up, okay? Yeah. That's number one. Number two is, I tell people all the time, if you can, put the alarm across the room unless it's going to bother your bed partner. Like if they get to wake up later, then don't annoy them by doing that. But if you can, force yourself to get out of bed and walk across the room to turn the alarm off, because that's very, very helpful in kind of kicking off your morning time. Now, as a general guideline, the best way to wake up is with the rising sun without an alarm. That is just, historically, the literature would say that your body, once enough light comes in the room, your melatonin production comes down and your body wakes up naturally. And that would arguably be the best way to do this. Now, you and I have a problem with that. You want to know why? Because we're night owls and we hate mornings, and we hate morning people. We hate morning. So for us, mornings are tough. And so what we also have to find is an alarm that's effective and not annoying, right? And so there's some alarms that they're so loud or they have an obnoxious tone. That's not really worthwhile. So you have to really play around and find the thing for you that kind of makes the most sense. Especially if you're a night owl and you're having to force yourself to wake up earlier than your body naturally wants you to go. Now, there is another option, which is you talk to your boss and you say, hey, I'm a night owl It's really hard for me to wake up in the mornings, and I'm not producing very good work for you anyway at 8 o'clock. Let me come in at 10. Let me stay until 7.
That's a great idea.
And let's see if I'm more productive. It always works. Always. Right? Because if you can meet people where their body is, where their chronotype is, it works.
What about food? Are there specific foods or nutrients that you believe are beneficial or detrimental to a good night's sleep?
When people ask me about food, it usually breaks down into either protein, carbohydrates, or vitamins and minerals that they're really trying to get after, right? So let's break it down and look at it like that anyway, to just let people know and understand. So when people come to see me, oftentimes they're like, Michael, what supplement do I need for sleep? Or what should my dinner look like for better sleep? Or all of those different things, right? So before I do that, step number 1, blood work. I want to know, what does your magnesium look like, your vitamin D, your iron, and your omegas, okay?
Those 4.
All 4 of those have a dramatic effect on your sleep cycle. So if you are deficient, that's where we start, okay? Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, well, what should I eat every night for a good sleep meal? That's not how we're thinking about it. What we're thinking about here is, how do we fix your deficiencies so that your body has enough material in order to sleep appropriately, right? And so we want high magnesium, high omega, high iron, and high vitamin D foods if we can have them. Now, to be fair, 75% of at least the United States has low vitamin D, 75%. 56% are magnesium deficient. So I'm pretty comfortable saying that's the place to start, is if you're looking for foods, look for foods that can help with your deficiencies. So we know magnesium, it's almost all leafy greens because it's the chlorophyll, the green stuff inside the plant that gives us the magnesium. And remember, we have to eat our magnesium. Our bodies don't produce it. So having a leafy green salad every day is a really good idea, right? And if you haven't had that, then having those leafy greens at night is going to be helpful for you with your magnesium, which helps your vitamin D, which helps your sleep. So that's where I like to start, is looking kind of in there. Now, what is sleep unfriendly? That's probably a better question to ask. Yeah. So sleep unfriendly, here's what I'll tell you. Alcohol is the number 1 offender. Now, you mentioned that you don't drink anymore, and I think it's awesome. I can't even remember the last time I had an alcoholic beverage. And I'll be honest with you why. It's so bad for your body. It's unbelievable. I mean, the data just keeps coming out more and more and more. You know, don't get me wrong. If you want to have a nice glass of wine with your meal, I don't have a problem with it. 1 glass, maybe 2. But if you have more than 2 glasses, we know it's going to affect your ability to fall asleep and get into deep sleep stages. So the number 1 real no-no for food-wise is going past 2 glasses of wine. The second, unfortunately, has to do with sugar. Now, sugar, I wish it didn't have as many problems as it does, but sugar prevents production of melatonin. Sugar throws off your circadian cycles. I mean, it's a mess, and especially a lot of sugar late at night. And let's be fair, I love dessert. Okay, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm an ice cream fiend. I love ice cream, but like having dairy, that level of terrible carbohydrates for you, high sugar, high fructose, like you can't pick a worse thing to eat at night before bed than ice cream. Okay, so again, thinking through what you want to do. Now, what is a good snack to have at night if you are hungry? I like to keep it to about a 250 calorie snack. I would say it would be about 50% carbs, 50% protein and fat. So what I'm talking about here is like a rice cake with like almond butter on it. That would be a perfect, 45 minutes before bed snack, okay? Because it's just enough protein, especially if you're training and you're trying to keep your protein levels up, or if you're elderly, we know that as your protein levels lower, so does your muscle levels, and we want to try to keep that up. Or maybe an apple with some nut butter, or
you get the fats as well, right?
Yeah. Avocado on top of it would be even better, right? Or a scrambled egg with a little avocado on it. That's a great, snack, single egg type of thing. So like there are lots and lots of very positive things that I think people can eat, but we really want to be thoughtful. Again, looking at when you eat, how much you eat, and avoiding some of those other things. The last one I'll tell you about is spicy food. And I'm going to tell you something. I love spicy food. I like it all. And the problem is if you have too much new types of spices in your stomach at night, it can cause a lot of stomach distress, and that can make your sleep messed up and make you go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So, really try to understand. And again, if you follow this idea of the 3-2-1 rule, it really gives your body enough time to get the alcohol out, get the food out, and get the water in for you to really set your body up for having a nutritional kind of sleep, if you will, having all the nutrients on board necessary to have that successful sleep.
A couple of short questions before we wrap it up. Do you give, Dr. Breus, different sleep advice depending on the age?
So as an example, as my patients get older, I actually start to look for more sleep disorder, right? So apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome is a big one that we see in our patients as they get older. So as we get older, we get more medically complicated, which means our sleep gets more complicated. And that's when an official sleep diagnosis has a tendency to occur. So if I've got a patient who walks through the door and they're 50 years old, and they've never had a sleep study and their sleep isn't so good, I'm probably going to send them for a sleep study or send a sleep study to their home. Now we have ones where we can send them to your home. You don't actually even have to go into the hospital any longer, which is very convenient and more representative of a good night's sleep anyway. So I think that's kind of one of the things that we recommend for people. Also, as we get older, our nutritional profile changes and what our needs are changes, right? So we need more protein as we get older to maintain our muscle, because that really is the longevity. Like if you're looking for the cure for longevity, it's muscle. you know, that's just the bottom line. Like the data on it is stay active, eat at least a gram of protein per body weight if you can. I don't even know how people do that, because I'd have to eat 155 grams of protein a day. Like I couldn't do that. Like that's But like if you can, as you get older, you want to increase your protein intake. And one other thing that I think a lot of my elderly clients don't really think about is you really have to watch their caffeine consumption, because they're older and they only drink 3 things: water, coffee, and alcohol, right? And so that's what their life is used to. And so if they're thirsty during the day, a lot of them will just reach for a cup of coffee out of habit, not because they actually want the stimulant from it. And so what we find in a lot of our older patients is they're overstimulated with caffeine. They've got so much caffeine on board that we have to start to decrease that and taper them off. Because if we just yank the caffeine out from under them, it's a mess. Like they have rebound insomnia. It's a problem. So in my elderly folks, I'm looking at nutrition. I'm looking at caffeine consumption. And the last thing is consistency, of bedtime. And here's why. When you're older, you don't have a schedule, right? And so here's what ends up happening is you're watching a ball game on Saturday afternoon. You're out cold, right? You're completely asleep. It's an unscheduled nap, which occurs, and that affects your ability to sleep at night. So for a lot of my elderly patients, my key factor is just try not to be sedentary. Number one, it's not good for you. But number two, the more active you are, the better your sleep. And we know that as people age, they have more disruptions. So remember when we were talking about what makes for good sleep quality? It's those interruptions that make sleep quality poor. That happens more the older you get. So it's more important to have that consistent sleep cycle, that consistent sleep schedule, and follow those rules.
Last question. Dr. Breus, can you share any exciting projects that you're working on?
So I have 2 books that I'm working on. One just came out. It's fiction. So usually I write nonfiction self-help books. This is a murder mystery involving a sleep doctor and his sleep patient. So it's lots of fun. It's available on Amazon. It's called The Sleeper. It's not yet translated into Spanish, but we're working on it. It's a lot of fun. So that published last week. And then in January of this next coming year, I have a new book, nonfiction, coming out. And that's going to be called Sleep, Drink, Breathe. And it's all about how to make wellness less complicated.
Next year, right?
Next year.
Okay. So where can people find you if they want to know more?
My website is thesleepdoctor.com. And I tell everybody, go and take my sleep quiz or my chrono quiz to learn your chronotype, because I will teach you when to have coffee, when to eat, when to exercise, when to have you name it. We'll get you all the info if you need it.
You know what? I still have a bunch of questions, but we will have to leave that for the next time because I know that you have to run. Know that you have a patient wait. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great. It's been so interesting, really fascinating. Thank you.
And Niklas, I want to just say thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's such an honor to get a chance to talk internationally to people who have an interest in my work. It's always very flattering. So I just want to say thank you for supporting my work and my books and having me on your podcast and introducing me to your audience.
It's an honor. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day and sweet dreams from the Sleep Doctor.
Thank you.
This was just one episode. There's so much more to discover. Check out the full podcast series, subscribe for future episodes, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.